Every NBA franchise has gone through ecstasy and despair.
It's over! It's over!
Some seasons fighting for championships, and others being stuck in the lottery. But which winning teams were the very best? Here are the greatest seasons in the history of each of the 30 NBA franchises. Miami has made 6 NBA Finals and won 3 championships, but the best season in Heat's history was easily 2013. They won the franchise record 66 games. LeBron James was 1 vote shy from becoming the first unanimous MVP in NBA history, and their big three was finally firing on all cylinders. Miami was first in the NBA in 2-point efficiency, second in 3-point efficiency, and had the second best offensive rating. Together with their blitzing, high-flying defense, they had the second best net rating in the NBA, and were by far the most attractive team in the league. During the final stretch of the season, they won 27 straight games, which is the second best winning streak ever. Sure, they were staring at the abyss of another finals loss in Game 6 against the Spurs, but Ray Allen saved the day. And those dramatics in the finals made the title that much sweeter. But no one does drama and sweet title celebrations like the LA Lakers. They have made the finals a record 32 times and won 17 championships. The Lakers were so good that they have 3 different teams that can qualify as the best. In 1972, LA compiled a 33-game winning streak, the longest win streak in U.S. professional team sports. Led by Hall of Famers Jerry West, Wilt Chamberlain, and Gail Goodrich, the Lakers had a 69-13 record, which was the best regular season ever at the time. They were either first or second in all offensive and defensive metrics. After losing in 8 consecutive finals, the 72 Lakers broke the curse and lifted the Larry O'Brien Trophy with a dominant performance in the playoffs. The 1987 Lakers deserve to be mentioned as well, with MVP Magic, Defensive Player of the Year Michael Cooper, prime James Worthy, and still effective and indestructible Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. They won 65 games in the regular season, with just 3 losses in 4 playoff series, on their way to a title against their biggest nemesis, the Celtics. And finally, there are the 2001 Lakers, with prime Shaq and Kobe. O'Neal and Bryant won 67 games and the championship in 2000, but Shaq celebrated too hard and came into the 2001 season overweight. While he was getting into shape, Kobe was dominating, entering the first season of his prime. So when Shaq came to full strength, it was game over. While they weren't so effective in the regular season, winning just 56 games, the Lakers couldn't be touched in the playoffs. They went 15-1 in the postseason, which was an NBA record at the time. Kobe and Shaq combined averaged 60 points, 20 rebounds, and 10 assists throughout the playoffs, and they were the most dominant 1-2 punch in NBA playoff history. Like the Lakers, the Celtics have won 17 championships in 22 finals appearances. Out of all the titles in the 60s and 70s, the best Celtics season and one of the best teams ever is from 1986. Boston won 67 games in the regular season. Larry Bird won his 3rd consecutive MVP award, and all their best players were in their basketball prime. With 4 Hall of Famers starting and another one coming off the bench, the Celtics had the 3rd best offense and the number 1 defense in the regular season. In the playoffs, all of their starters averaged 15 points or more, and with a 15-3 postseason record, they dominantly won the NBA championship, something the Warriors know a thing or two about. But the Warriors weren't always like this. Apart from the Rick Barry era and their 1975 championship, Golden State used to be one of the biggest losers in the NBA. And then came the Splash Brothers, who changed everything, transforming the Warriors into perennial champions. Golden State famously owns the best record in the regular season, with 73 wins and just 9 losses in 2016. Steph smashed the single-season 3-point record and became the first unanimous MVP. But that all didn't mean a thing, because they didn't win a ring. But their dramatic Game 7 loss to the Cavaliers was a blessing in disguise, because it enabled them to add Kevin Durant. In 2017, the Warriors won slightly less in the regular season, with a 67-15 record, but were a far better team. With 4 starters playing all-NBA defense and 3 of the greatest shooters ever, Golden State was so far and beyond everyone else that it didn't seem fair. They had the best offense and the 2nd best defense in the regular season, and in the playoffs, they absolutely trashed the Western Conference, sweeping all 3 series with an average margin of victory of 17 points. In the finals, they were on the brink of another sweep, leading the series 3-0 before the super stacked Cavs finally managed to defeat them. But in the very next game, it was game over, and the Warriors completed the playoffs with a 16-1 record, which was the best championship run in NBA history. And that's why many people believe the 2017 Warriors are the best team of all time. Another team that deserves to be mentioned as one of the best teams of all time belongs thanks to the Spurs. Between their inaugural NBA season in 1977 and 2019, San Antonio missed just 4 playoffs. During Tim Duncan's era, they were the most successful franchise in all 4 major American sports. And despite 4 consecutive losing seasons, they still own the best win-loss percentage in NBA history, with 61% of games resulting in a dub. But out of all their winning seasons, and out of all of the 5 championships they won, they never played more beautifully and more effectively than in 2014. Tony Parker was in the middle of his prime, Duncan and Ginobili were at the back end of theirs, and Kawhi Leonard was just getting into his. After a heartbreaking loss in the 2013 finals, the Spurs came back with a vengeance, winning 62 games in the regular season, with the best net rating in the NBA, and the most unselfish team ever. They had 9 players averaging over 8 points per game, and nobody averaging over 16. With 4 Hall of Famers and 0 egos, the Spurs played a beautiful game, and absolutely destroyed the Heat in the finals for their 5th NBA championship. But unlike the Spurs, the 90s Bulls had a lot of egos, but that didn't stop them from winning. The 1995 Bulls lost in the playoffs, partly because Jordan was not at his best after his return from baseball, but even more importantly, because they were weak in the middle. But once they added the best rebounder in NBA history to the team, the flamboyant Dennis Rodman, they had the most talented and unstoppable team in the NBA. With Rodman, Pippen, Jordan, and Ron Harper, the Bulls had the stingiest and most impenetrable defense in the NBA. And because they also had the best European player at the time, and the most accurate shooter ever next to the greatest scorer in history, they had the best offense too. The 96 Bulls are one of only 2 teams to lead the NBA in both offensive and defensive rating, and their net rating of plus 13.4 points per 100 possessions is the highest mark ever. They won 72 games in the regular season, which was an NBA record, and many still consider these Bulls to be the best team of all time, especially because they also won a championship, unlike the Warriors. And when we're talking about Jordan, there aren't many NBA franchises that hate his guts more than the Utah Jazz. Led by Stockton and Malone, Utah had 20 consecutive winning seasons between 1984 and 2003. The crown jewel of their partnership was the 1997 and 1998 seasons, where they won 64 and 62 games and went to consecutive NBA finals. But thanks to Michael Jordan, Utah never won an NBA championship and is the winningest franchise ever not to win a title. The Phoenix Suns share their pain because they made it to 3 NBA finals without winning a single ring. They first made the finals in 1976, losing to the Celtics in 6 games. Then in 1993, when Charles Barkley was the MVP, but couldn't defeat Jordan and the Bulls. And then finally in 2021, when CP3 and Book couldn't get over Giannis. But surprisingly enough, their best regular season team was the last one. In 2022, the Suns won a franchise record 64 games, with a top 5 offense and defense. But then, they threw it all away in the playoffs, completely collapsing and losing by almost 50 points to Luka and the Mavs. Unlike the Jazz and the Suns, the Sixers weren't so consistently good, and they have had some terrible years. #trust the process. But they won 2 NBA championships, and both of those teams are legendary and deserve to be mentioned. The first one is the 1967 team that won 68 games, which is the best result in franchise history, led by MVP Wilt Chamberlain, who averaged 24 points, 24 rebounds, and 8 assists per game, and 3 other Hall of Famers who all averaged over 18 points per game. The Sixers were unstoppable. In the playoffs, Chamberlain finally defeated Bill Russell and the Celtics after 5 consecutive playoff losses. Even though the Celtics won 8 straight titles up to that point, the Sixers gave them no chance in 1967, winning the series 4-1 behind Wilt's monstrous triple-double average of 22 points, 32 rebounds, and 10 assists. And the second Sixers team that captured the ultimate prize and won a ring is the 1983 team, led by Dr. J and Moses Malone. After they won 65 games in the regular season and won the MVP award, Big Moses gave a quick prediction for the playoffs. Faux, meaning that the Sixers would sweep all 3 playoff series for the title. His prediction turned out to be wrong, but only slightly. After they won the first series in 4 games, they needed 5 to get past the second round. But in the finals against Magic and Kareem, they returned to form and won in 4 games, sweeping the Lakers for the championship. At the same time when Moses was dominating, there was another big man with an equally good game. He was a red-haired hippie named Bill Walton, who was rarely healthy, but when he was usually winning. Walton Walton led his Portland Trail Blazers to the 1977 championship, and then he broke almost every bone that he could break. The most consistently successful era in the Blazers' history came in the early 90s, with Rick Adelman coaching and Clyde Drexler and Terry Porter as the top dogs. Drexler and Porter broke the franchise record with 63 regular season wins and made the finals in 1990 and 1992, and conference finals in 91. But there was always something missing, and Portland tasted no champagne. Championship bubbly was never tasted in Oklahoma either, but maybe that's just karma. In 2008, Oklahoma stole the franchise from Seattle and kept all of their records as their own.
Sonics history is in Seattle. Take Gary Payton and the Sonics name off this abomination of a list.
So the best season in Thunder history actually happened in 1996, when the Supersonics won a franchise record 64 regular season games. But even though Gary Payton and Shawn Kemp's aerial connection terrorized the rest of the NBA, they couldn't get past the 72-10 Bulls in the finals. However, the Sonics did win a title in 1979, defeating Washington in the finals. What Seattle did in 1979 was to return the favor, because Washington defeated them in the finals in 1978. It was one of 4 Bullets trips to the finals during the Wes Unseld era, who won the Rookie of the Year and the MVP title in 1969. After Big Wes retired in 1981, the Wizards rarely made the playoffs, and when they did, they never got past the second round. A similar fate struck the Milwaukee Bucks, who in their first 6 years of existence became the most successful NBA franchise just because they lucked out on a coin toss and selected Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. In Kareem's second season, the Bucks won 66 games and became the first ever team to lead the NBA in both offensive and defensive rating. Then they pummeled through the playoffs with 12 wins and just 2 losses, sweeping Washington in the NBA Finals for their first championship. Just like the Bucks, the Rockets won 2 NBA titles. But actually, their best regular season team didn't win the title. In 2018, they won 65 games with the best offense and number 5 defense in the NBA and the best net rating. Harden was a scoring machine, and the Rockets were the only team that could do something against the mighty Warriors. They almost succeeded too, but CP3's injury and 27 missed threes in a row saw them lose Game 7 of the Western Finals to Golden State. So because they didn't win the title, the 94 iteration of the Rockets has to be considered the best. They were only average offensively and won 58 games, and they played extremely close playoff series. But Hakeem was unstoppable, winning MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, and then the Finals MVP, where the Rockets won their first NBA championship in a 7-game thriller against the Knicks. And when it comes to New York, there hasn't been a lot to be happy about lately.
I'm a diehard Knicks fan. They've been sorry for a long time.
When the Garden Was Eden is a wonderful documentary about the Knicks' 2 championship seasons, but almost every Knicks fan had to watch the documentary to taste championship glory, because most of the people who lived through it are now in their 60s and 70s. The 1970 Knicks were one of the best defensive teams in NBA history. With a 92.4 defensive rating, they conceded 10 points less than the average NBA team that year. Led by Walt Frazier and center Willis Reed, they edged out Wilt Chamberlain in the finals for their first NBA title. Another franchise that's won with some great defense is the Pistons. The Pistons were great for 5 years in the 80s, and then for 5 years between 2004 and 2008. Everything else kind of sucked, to be honest. But if we had to single out one of their 3 championship seasons, we'd have to go with the first one in 1989. Detroit won 63 games that year, and they swept 3 out of 4 series in the playoffs, including the finals against the Lakers. Bonus points go to beating the living shit out of Michael Jordan and the Bad Boys nickname. But there is an NBA saying that great offense always defeats great defense, and the Mavericks certainly believed in that. However, the best season in Mavs history is also the most painful one. In 2007, they won a franchise record 67 games and were the heavy favorites to win the title after they lost the 2006 finals. But the Warriors believed and produced one of the biggest upsets in NBA history, becoming just the 3rd 8-seeded team to defeat the best team in the regular season. After the embarrassing loss, Dirk won the MVP award and said that he didn't feel like he even deserved it. Thankfully for Dirk and the Mavs fans, all the bitter disappointments were erased with that 2011 title. Similarly to the Mavericks, the Cavaliers also won one title that healed all losing wounds. LeBron took the Cavs to 5 NBA Finals, but ironically, their best team wasn't the one who made it to the finals at all. In 2009, Cleveland won a franchise record 66 games and had a +10 net rating, which is one of the 10 best point differentials in NBA history. After sweeping the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, they lost lost to Dwight's Magic, who denied a Kobe-LeBron finals. Still, if you ask any Cavs fan which is their best team in franchise history, 100% of them will tell you that it's the 2016 team. I guess that nothing tastes sweeter than championship champagne, but Indiana Pacers fans wouldn't know that, at least not in the NBA. Indiana was one of the greatest ABA teams, with 3 championships in the early 70s. In the NBA, they were far less successful, with only 1 finals appearance in 2000, but their best regular season was in 2004, when Ron Artest was the Defensive Player of the Year, and when Jermaine O'Neal was one of the best centers in the NBA. But after 61 wins, they lost to the later champions Detroit, and a year later, Malice at the Palace happened, which completely destroyed their team. And just like the Pacers, the Nuggets never won an NBA title. Denver always had fun and attractive teams that scored a lot of points, but they never made it far in the playoffs. The Nuggets have never experienced the NBA Finals, and they have been to only 3 conference finals. Interestingly, in each conference finals, they lost to the Lakers. Since the 2009 team won the most games and was the closest to advancing to the finals, we have to choose those Carmelo-led Nuggets as the best in franchise history. The Hawks did win a ring. The Hawks won 1 NBA title in 1958 when they were still in St. Louis, defeating Bill Russell's Celtics and giving him his lone finals loss. Since they moved to Atlanta in 1968, they made the conference finals twice. In 2015, they won a franchise record of 60 games, had 4 All-Stars, and they played great in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. And then came LeBron James, who swept them and showed them who's the boss and sent them home. But there was another franchise that suffered even more from LeBron's dominance. In 2018, the Raptors won a franchise record 59 games. Dwayne Casey was the Coach of the Year, and DeMar DeRozan was their best scorer. And then came the playoffs, where LeBron James swept the Raptors, humiliating DeRozan, who got left on the bench in the 4th quarter, and Casey got fired.
After getting swept out of the playoffs by the Cleveland Cavs, Toronto has fired Coach Dwayne Casey.
In 2019, Toronto traded DeRozan for Kawhi, and even though they won 1 game less than in 2018 and had a slightly worse offensive rating, they kept winning when it was the most important, and for the first time ever, the Larry O'Brien Trophy left the USA for Canada. And when you get the first pick in the draft, the Larry O'Brien Trophy is exactly what you hope for. The Orlando Magic had 4 #1 picks in franchise history, and 2 of them led to the NBA Finals, and they were both nicknamed Superman. In 1995, with the original Superman Shaquille O'Neal, Orlando had the #1 offense in the league, winning 57 games, but ultimately getting swept in the finals by the Rockets. In 2009, with Superman Dwight Howard, Orlando had the #1 defense in the league, winning 59 games, but ultimately losing in the finals to the Lakers. Another great team that had the #1 defense in the league and then lost to the Lakers in the finals is the 2002 New Jersey Nets. The Nets won 2 ABA titles with Julius Erving, but when they came to the NBA, they had to give up the doctor to stay financially afloat. Without Dr. J, they were terrible, and they remained bad until 2002, when Jason Kidd came along and immediately pushed the team to 2 consecutive NBA finals. But Shaq and Kobe were too strong, and so were Tim Duncan and David Robinson. Surprisingly, the 2002 season is the only year the Nets won over 50 games, and they have the lowest percentage of 50-win seasons in NBA history. But speaking of bad teams, Michael Jordan's Charlotte had famously horrible years, and their 2012 squad has an NBA record for the worst record in NBA history. Their best record occurred in 1997, led by Glenn Rice, Del Curry, Muggsy Bogues, and Vlade Divac, a Serbian center who they got in a trade with the Lakers for some unproven kid named Kobe Bryant. Yeah, that turned out well. Divac is mostly remembered for the Kobe trade, and for passing on Luka Doncic as the GM of the Kings. But his best playing days happened while he played for the Kings, with whom he became an All-Star in 2001. and came close to winning the 2002 NBA championship. Sacramento played the best basketball that season, and their starting 5 of Bibby, Stojakovic, Christie, Weber, and Divac was the best 5-man lineup in the NBA. They had the best record in the NBA, but in the conference finals, some bad luck and some horrible officiating prevented them from reaching the finals for the first time. There were a few other teams that never reached the finals, and one of those are the Minnesota Timberwolves. But in 2004, they came close. Kevin Garnett played out of his mind and won won the MVP. Minnesota won a franchise record 58 games and advanced to the conference finals. But again, the Lakers with Shaq and Kobe couldn't be beaten, and the Timberwolves fell back to mediocrity. And if any franchise has to consider mediocrity as its middle name, it would have to be the Clippers. In over 50 years of existence, they reached the conference finals only once, and that happened in 2021. Otherwise, their best regular season happened in 2014, during the Lob City era, when CP3 and Blake pushed them to 57 wins, before they ruined it all in the playoffs. The early 2010s were a great time for giving nicknames to teams, and there were few better than the Grit and Grind Grizzlies. Led by Tony Allen, Defensive Player of the Year Marc Gasol, and his partner in crime Zach Randolph, the 2013 Grizzlies played a slow, methodical, and physical brand of basketball that looked like it was from the previous century. Still, they won 56 games and advanced to their first and only conference finals. And do you know the only NBA team that has never reached the conference finals? It's the New Orleans Pelicans, who were founded in 2002 and who won only 2 playoff series so far. Their best season came in 2008, when Chris Paul was an absolute monster, and when they won 56 games in the regular season. In the playoffs, they defeated Dirk and the Mavs, and they heroically pushed the Spurs to Game 7, but were too inexperienced to go all the way.